Yeah, so feel free to pop in my second grade classroom this afternoon.
We make sure that everyone is a little less anxious and somewhat more prepared to launch next year with a whole new math curriculum. We have done a release at every one of the 15 elementary sites to prepare for this. So I'm going to go ahead and just click over here because we have a welcome video from our superintendent.
Hi everybody, we are so excited to be launching Eureka in Vista Unified School District. As many of you know, we have not all had a curriculum that we can rely on, that we can work together around for many, many years, and so it's very historic and exciting that we're all beginning Eureka together. And I'm excited, I can't wait to see you be out in your classrooms and see you implementing it. Can't wait to see you collaborating around Eureka between schools, among schools, within schools. So I'm just really excited to be welcoming you to this exciting launch, and I'm so glad that you're here.
It is all students will make sense of rigorous mathematics and a balanced inquiry and standards-based math classroom at every grade level. Our principles of professional development, we're going to have a shared learning experience with site learning communities, and we're going to have a strength-based approach, and we're going to be very, very mindful of equity. Next year, it's not going to be a lockstep introduction to this program. Dr. Kerr in curriculum instruction was very mindful when they planned this. We know that it's going to be a year of learning. So that's what they've called this first year, a year of learning. After every module, each teacher will be completing a survey, giving us feedback on the curriculum, what they thought was lacking, what they thought was strengths, possibly something that had to be added or supplemented. Once all these surveys are gathered, there is an implementation team. One site leader at every school will be meeting with Kim Hollowell a couple of times a year to go over that survey data and make adjustments next year. So we are very, very excited that you're here. We wanted to make sure you also know that there is no assessments that are due. It will be between your grade level and your site to determine how you'll be implementing the assessments. And also looking at those assessments when the ones that you do choose, to see if they really are reflective of what you want to see in your math curriculum. So we want to definitely lower that anxiety, and we're going to go ahead and start.
Excited to be here with you today. It was nice to see some familiar faces as I walked through the room today. A little bit about me, and for my friends that are coming in, by all means, please make yourself comfortable wherever you like. So a little bit of backstory about me. I've been in education for about 16 years. As some of you heard earlier as you were walking in, I have been teaching in the Ontario Montclair School District, which isn't too far from here in Southern California. And my journey with Eureka Math began about 5 years ago. I started as a 3, 4, 5 math teacher implementing the curriculum. And then after teaching it for about 3 years, I stepped out of the classroom to become an instructional coach, where in true, right? How many hats do we wear as teachers? So in true teacher fashion, I was 50% instructional coach, and the other 50% of the time I was a classroom teacher. So I went back and taught grades K, 1, and 2. And in my kinder classroom, because we share classrooms, it was a TKK split. So my experience with this curriculum has, for the most part, been I've taught every grade level within the K-5 curriculum as we look at it. And so I really appreciate, as your district kind of led us off about this year of learning, I really encourage you through our time today that if you have questions, ask. I will be genuine, I will be honest about what it was like as a teacher. Oftentimes I tell my friends the gray hair that I have now has, I like to call it the fine shade of Eureka Gray from persevering over the years, but I promise it's been a well worth journey as we jump into this. So as it was framed in the morning, this is about a year of learning. And so we know that throughout the course of this morning, this is really a snapshot. We're going to spend about the next 90 or so minutes really diving into the curriculum so that you get to know it a little bit better. I will highlight some of the features that I found really useful as a teacher that, I'll be honest, that I didn't even know existed until 18 months in. So I taught this curriculum for 18 months before I ever had my first formal professional development. And so I'm really excited to know that you guys are getting way more than I ever received by kicking it off in this fashion. So as we kick off things here today, we have a couple resources at your table, and I want to make sure that everyone has full access to them. So you have a piece of cardstock there so that you can make a nameplate, because I love to use people's names. And then you should also have a participant handout at your table. And I know since some of us have moved, if we need to send some more your way, just let me know and we can send one over. You should have a lovely whiteboard, which we will use at one point during the session, but it's part of our tools for today. And you should also have a nifty Eureka pen, which doubles as a writing utensil, and a highlighter on the flip side.
Yeah.
As you pick things up, right? It's like magic. It's the little giveaway that's in there. So, here's what I'd like us to do. As we jump in today, which can at times probably feel like we're going quite fast, I'd like to ask everyone to just take a deep breath in, and to take a deep breath out, and know that we're going to do this together. So with that in mind, let's take a moment to think about why Eureka and what is Eureka Math. I'm going to invite everyone to open up in their participant handouts to page 1. And you'll see that you have a brief little paragraph up there in the front. Take a moment to read through that paragraph, and when you're finished reading that paragraph, I ask you to look up. Great. So as we come back together as a team, this is what today is all about. I totally appreciate the loincloth across Archimedes, if you know the real story of how this actually plays out. But today is about a day of discovery. Today is about taking the time to take note of some of those little aha moments within the curriculum, but also I really want to push you to really think about what is it that you're already doing in your classrooms, and how can we enhance it with the curriculum as you work through it with your students, all right? So as we go throughout today, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. In the back of your participant handout, which literally you could go to the very last page and then flip back by one, it's page 38 in your participant handout. You have Post-its in your bucket, or you can simply tab it. Throughout the course of today, I'm going to invite you to jot down some of your new learnings here. So if you want to flag it a little bit so that it's easier to go back to, this is going to be a page that we'll refer back to often so that you can capture some of your thoughts of our learning throughout today. Are there any questions before we get started? Nope, we're still smiling. That means we're good, we're a go. So let's go ahead and jump right in as we kick things off. Once you have page 38 flagged, I will invite you to turn back to that page 1 where we began our reading. So, as we kick this off, one of the first elements that I want to stop and give us an introduction are on the key shifts. So on a fist to 5, and it's okay to be 0, on a fist to 5, how familiar are you with the key shifts that came with the Common Core standards? 1, 2, and it's okay to be somewhere in the mix. Excellent, all right. So in some ways this will be like preaching to the choir, but maybe highlighting some of the things that are new for us. So first things first, the key shifts. There are 3 key shifts that came about when the Common Core standards were written. So for us in California, we can think back to what's the difference between our 97 standards and the big shift as we roll into Common Core. And as we think about the key shifts between the 3, what the writers came to understand is that when it came to instruction, we needed to narrow down our scope and sequence. And so what they called these shifts were focus, coherence, and rigor. The first key shift of focus, and I really appreciate my grade 2 teachers in the room, because I think my grade 2 teachers can speak the loudest about how on the 97 standards, grade 2 had more standards than any grade K through 5. And I know that because I taught grade 2 for 7 years. And then I went to grade 4, and the number of standards that we used to cover in a grade band, look at as my heads are shaking, yes, it was just insurmountable. And so one of the shifts that came forward with the Common Core was this idea of focus. Instead of trying to, as I like to call it, the spray and pray model, let's narrow that down. And let's actually focus on individualized standards and help students build a strong foundation so that they can be successful from year to year. And so really our focus was to narrow the scope and deepen the content. And so that is one of the major shifts that we saw happen with the Common Core state standards. The second shift that came about that had changed from 97 to now is this idea of coherence. For so long, we've taught math in isolation, right? If I say times tables, what grade do we think of? Third grade, right? And that's not what we want to happen anymore. How many of my kindergarten teachers are skip counting? We can skip count by fives, right? Hey, isn't that a direct correlation to multiplication? And so what Coherence told us is, we've been teaching these things in prior grades. So let's stop isolating it with individual grade levels, but let's rather capitalize on this vision of coherence. And so one thing that the curriculum has done has really thought about, how does the work that a first grade student do, how is it supported by the work in kinder, and for those of you in the room, in TK? And how does it build a coherent story for our students? You're going to see in a moment how the curriculum highlights coherence. If you have your participant handout open, if you turn to page 2, you'll see that there's actually a visual of what coherence may look like within the curriculum. So what you see on page 2 is a visual model of what is known as a number bond on how students are introduced to composing and decomposing numbers. And so what we're building is a coherent model that goes beyond us in K-5 and extends itself to middle school. That if we have a deep conceptual understanding, it shouldn't matter which grade we're in, we can still utilize those skills to support us as we continue to move forward. Now the third key shift that you see on our screen is rigor. And rigor has always been a part of math. What's changed is how we define it. In the past, and maybe I'm the only one that's guilty of this, because I think about when I taught upper grade, in the past, I would always associate rigor with just making the problem more complex, right? So I have the group of kids that know how to add 23 plus 13, so I'm gonna give the advanced group my gate cluster, I'm gonna give you 230 plus 135, right? I'd make the numbers larger. But that has changed, well, one, that isn't rigor, and two, we have actually defined what rigor is truly all about. To develop rigor within a child, we've actually broken it down, and you can see that there are 3 key components to working at a rigorous level. The first component is conceptual understanding. That means I, as an individual, or my students, are able to understand the why. Why is this happening? Why do these numbers break apart? And why does it work? The second key component of rigor is procedural skills and fluencies. That's what we think of as just standard fluency, right? In order for me to attack and understand the why, my brain power can't be consumed with figuring out 8 plus 6 and flipping around that 6, right? And counting on, because that's what a lot of our students still do. So what we're saying here is that we have to have a better method. It's okay if we start at the touch level, but we need to be able to move past it. And the third key component of rigor is application. Now, I was always confused about application. I always interpreted application as a student's ability to apply it, like here, I'm gonna give you this problem, can you apply it to the problem that I just taught? But true application comes in 2 forms. It's not only my ability to apply the skill in a real life scenario, but it's also a child's ability to apply it at a level slightly more rigorous than I taught it as a teacher. If I give them the exact same problem and all I do is change Sally to Tom, that's not really rigorous, right? All I did was front load the problem before it ever happened. And so what rigor is saying is that we have to do all 3 of these at equal intensity if we want to develop rigor within a child and within our students. And most importantly, within ourselves. Because I feel, and this is me, I always feel like these sessions are confessionals for me. I definitely believed I was doing rigor, but I know for a fact I wasn't doing all 3 of these. I definitely touched on one more than the other, and that's preference, right? As a teacher, I knew which area I liked, and I thought application was a fun project, so let's go with it, let's do a fun project. But realizing I really need to attend to all 3 is how it's going to come to fruition. So I love that I can see several of you taking notes and thinking about how this is going to impact your instruction for next year. In your participant handout on page 3, there are more in-depth notes about the 3 key shifts. But one of the reasons why we start with this piece on the key shifts is because you have to understand that when the writers came to produce this curriculum, this is what they had in mind. As they were developing the curriculum, they were trying to think about how can we attend to all 3 of these in conjunction with the standards that were outlined. So take a moment to pause. Are there any questions that I might be able to answer about your understanding on the key shifts? Or concerns? Or ahas as you think about what was just shared? You're all so quiet, it must be early, right? Does it sound a little familiar? Make sense? Right? I think far too long, I have taught various math curriculums over the year, and I have never seen a curriculum, and I'm not saying this just because I've taught this, that really speaks to coherence like this particular one does, because they were really mindful of the bands and understanding that with Common Core, because we wanted that coherence, that things can be broken down into a band of TK through grade 2. That is the first band of the standards. And then as it moves on, it goes 3 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12. So together, we get to work as a cohesive unit as we think about these pieces. So if there are no questions on the key shifts, it's really a brief introduction just to understand them a little bit better. Then let's go ahead and transition. I'd like to transition into what is known as the module overview. And so and I can't remember who asked, I don't think it was Julia that said it this morning, but hopefully everyone came in with a module in hand. And so I'd like to give you a moment to go ahead and pull out that teacher edition that you brought with you. And I'm also going to encourage you to turn to page 4 in your participant handbook. Yes.
The TEs that we had for the pilot, are they updated and different than these, or can we use those also, or should we get rid of those?
So your pilot happened this year, so those would be the most up-to-date teacher editions.
So they're the same ones?
They are
We
the
don't have
same.
to
Nothing
worry
has
about-
changed between last year and this year with regards to revisions. If you had a TE from about 3 years ago, I would say you'd want an updated version, but if it's, and one way that you can identify that, so it's a great question as you think about it, Sheila, is that when you look inside your teacher edition, there's actually, it's very tiny, I feel like you have to have bionic eyes to read it, but there's a little number there that will tell you the year and the version that you have, and you can always compare it online with the newest version. But based on your pilot, I know for a fact that you're working off the newest version, but you can always tell by reading that little number down below, all right? So what I'd like us to transition to is a study into what is known as the module overview narrative. And so, or it's not really, a piece of it is called the narrative, it's really the module overview. And so let's be honest, let's be transparent as I'm going to say this. All right, let's open up our TE. It totally looks like a college textbook, right? Not gonna lie, let's not sugarcoat it, it is what it is. And as I said, it was 18 months before I ever had my first real professional development. In true teacher fashion, none of this looks like something I'd want to read. It's long, it's wordy, it's lengthy. I just wanna go to lesson 1 because that's where my lesson begins. So here's what I'm going to help you with. I'm going to highlight out of this module overview narrative, where do you as a teacher get the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to studying this curriculum? Especially my first grade, do my first grade teachers look at that? module. Your module is ginormous. This is grade 4 and it's 2 modules in one. And grade 2, don't hold up your book because it'll make them a little sad as they see the depth or the width of your book as you look at it at large. So here's the kind of like a walkthrough pathway of understanding this overview. So the first thing I'd like for you to write on that page 4 of your participant handout, we're going to use this as our note-taking guide. So the first item that we're going to look at is the table of contents. I'm just going to abbreviate it as TOC. If you know what the table of contents, the acronym is, you can write that, or if you prefer to write it out at large, you may. So the table of contents begins in every module on page 1. And I'll invite you to go ahead and turn to your table of contents now. So when we look at the table of contents, you're thinking like she's crazy. Christine, it's a table of contents. So here's what I want you to think about. Think big idea. In addition to the key shifts that help scope this curriculum, the second thing that you need to know that I was totally in awe of was that the curriculum was written like a story. And I say that out loud because I never really took note of the fact that my module on the outside was entitled A Story of Units. And as I move on, and I love, thank you for being yes, Alex, because I totally missed that my first years of teaching. The curriculum is written as a story, and so our story that we're telling in grades TK through 5 is this story of units. And how does a unit help us come to understand mathematics? So if I have that notion tucked in the back of my mind, then when I look at some of these elements, I'm thinking, all right, story, big idea. What are some of the big ideas I can gain from reading the table of contents? Since all of our table of contents are slightly different, what are some general things that you realize by looking at your table of contents? And feel free to shout them out.
I have a family math newsletter section.
Nice! So we can see that in some elements we have newsletters,
Yes.
or at least call to attention of these newsletters. What else do you notice that maybe makes it different than a normal table of contents you would have seen in the past?
Broken down into topics.
Yeah, we don't have chapters, we have topics. Any other elements that you're noticing?
The mid-module assessment and then an end. So there's a mid.
Yeah, we see assessments. Love that. And mid and end, for my friends who have mid and end, it's probably because you have more than 4 topics. For my grade 2 teachers who are like, we don't have a mid-module assessment, it's because you have less than 4 topics. So 4 or more, and you'll have that assessment, both assessments embedded into it. Anything else that you think a teacher might find resourceful? Yes, Julia.
I don't know if this is, I'm looking through the computer version, but the scaffolds for the English learners and stuff, I think that's pretty, I mean, that's really nice.
I love that little element that you're adding there, and I'm going to add it to the bottom of my note-taking guide because we're gonna get to that piece, so I appreciate that you're calling it out early.
Answer key.
Answer key, right? How often have I worked a problem and thought, is that right? Especially when I was doing some of the 5th grade work. It's like, I know how to solve it the standard algorithm way. Answer key. Excellent. So, and I would say you've nailed them all. When we look at a table of contents with Eureka Math, because it's written as a story, I'll show you what this is really my 4th grade TE when I taught. It's hard to read from afar, so I apologize. The item that I write up here, any of you do depth and complexity icons, you'll see them throughout my book, but so I'm trying to remind myself, big idea, what is the story I'm trying to tell? So when I look at a table of contents, I'm looking for coherence. What coherence do I see between the topics? So really channeling my vision as I think big picture. Because it's really easy, especially my 1st grade teachers, to get sucked into my module and think, is it ever going to end? This is a huge module. And so this reminds me that I need to come up for air and think big picture. What is the story I'm trying to tell? Where is the coherence? It's there, Christine said it was there, so to shine a light on it. All right. Questions about that? No? God, you're such a great I'm loving this. You're making my life so easy. All right. The next component, so I can fill in table of contents. The next component I'd like us to look at is what is known as the module overview narrative. I'm going to list it as narrative. Now this begins on page 2 for everyone, but it ends on different pages for everyone. So the module overview narrative is really like the Cliff Notes. For you as a teacher, it's the Cliff Notes of your module. So you could go through and read every word, line for line, or you can get a big scope and sequence of what the module is all about by reading the narrative. What I'd like to give you right now is about 2 minutes time, which I know for my first grade team is not enough time, but I'd like to give you about 2 minutes to read through the module overview narrative, and as you read, I want to focus your energy. I'd like for you to take note or highlight or underline with that pencil that's in your hand, underline any models you see, any language that you think might be new for your students, and any questions, like you read something and you're like, oh, I kind of have a question about that. All right? Are there any questions that I might answer before I give you one to read? All right. Take a couple moments to read. What were some things that stood out to you as you were going through and reading the module overview narrative? Let's hear from our TKK teachers and we'll go in order. Something that stood out to you.
The fact that they're expecting them to begin talking about math right away.
Right?
Dialogue.
Which at first I was a little puzzled by when I taught that, like, what are they going to know as we jump into this? But then I started to think about, so where are numbers and how are they all around them? From the address on, as they're walking down the street or in the market when they're looking at eggs and different items, how really numbers are all around them, and we do it with language arts. So I don't know why I thought that doing it with math would be slightly different in that regard. Thank you for sharing, Emily. How about grade 1, something that stood out to you?
I think one of the things, because the three of us piloted the program, is using the vocabulary to teach them. It's not just put together, it's not just add, but using the decompose, compose, subatize, using the languages like summa, find the difference. So using that language, I think it's going to really bump up that rigor or the coherence for the kids.
And I really appreciate you calling attention to that. I know I stumbled into your conversation when that was happening. And that's something that I really appreciated, because in the past, I always had a math wall, which I could still have. But what I realized is that when I was teaching this vocabulary, or as I refer to it, the language of the discipline, that it really made me own the fact that every time I'm introducing it, I'm always introducing it in the context of the math. So the word always comes out for the first time when you're actually in the middle of a lesson and students are learning it through that lens. And how about my grade 2 teacher, something that stood out to you?
Just that they're assuming a lot at the beginning that they're gonna come from it, and our first grade teachers piloted it. I don't know how long you piloted from the beginning of the year.
Pretty much.
So at least we feel like we're fortunate that we'll have some background knowledge of the program.
And I really appreciate you calling attention to that, Allison, because that was a misconception I had going into teaching this curriculum. We have to remember as teachers, just as I said in the very beginning, it's written as a story. So for our grade 2 teachers, the curriculum doesn't know that your students haven't heard the first 2 chapters of that story. And so there are some key words that I would encourage you to write down in that note-taking guide. The words are foundation. If you see the words in your module overview narrative and it says this is the foundation to whatever the standard is, that means you're the one introducing it. It's the first time they're seeing it. So that's something that's really helpful to know when you read that module overview narrative. The other piece that's helpful to know is the word extension. If it says extension, like this is an extension of of working with a vertical number line, that means you are not the introduction, it happened in a previous grade level. So I just want to put those keywords, because had I known that, I would have spent more time introducing it with my first year of implementation. So those are little words that you can look for in that overview. I'll also show you that there's also almost like a little, I don't know, what would you call it? There's like a little sneak peek clue that will support you with that discovery as well as teachers. So when we think about the narrative, here's what I have to say about the narrative when I first taught the curriculum. I did not know what a tape diagram was. I saw it and it kind of made sense to me, but I didn't know. I was teaching 5th grade. And I probably spent close to 10 hours researching on Google. I was like, is it the same as a bar model? How different is it from Singapore to what we're doing here in Eureka Math? And it was in that moment that I actually stumbled upon this page. I was like, somewhere it's got to tell us what this model is all about. And I realized had I just taken the 10 minutes to read this, not only did it give me a model, it actually told me step by step how to use it. So that is my own little prophecy for this piece, is that every time I felt a little stumbled by, why are we doing it this way? If I came back and reread this, then I was reminded of the bigger purpose. And it really speaks to that. Focus. What is the focus and the goal here, and where is it going to lead to later? So there's my own little confessional there. So, as I mentioned before, this overview is beefy. There's a lot of things in it. So what I'd like to give you a moment to do now with your peers is take about 90 seconds to page through it. And because the best people for this are you. What do you find valuable? What other resources do you see within the module overview? You'll know that you're still in the overview because it says it in the upper right-hand corner. So take a moment with your peers to look through and page through. What other resources do you find of value? Yes, Sheila.
We use during the pilot time the notes on the pacing. They tell you when you can kind of disregard a lesson or put together one lesson, you know, if you're on a time constraint. So every now and then we would read through it and we'd say, oh, let's not do this lesson. This one can be all done in one. They say we can delete the word problems. So that was really helpful. Because you can't always do every single lesson. We all know that.
Right? So the notes on pacing, on omissions and consolidations, yeah, definitely one of those additional resources we want to make sure that we shine a light on. So take a moment now to continue Sheila's work and see, are there any other resources as you page through it that you find valuable that we'd like to share out with the group? So take about 90 seconds to go through that. Some of those additional resources. What stood out to you on your page through of the overview? So I love the notes on pacing. Anything else? Yes, Alex.
It's called the distribution of instructional minutes.
Yeah, so it gives you a breakdown of minutes. That's really helpful.
The other thing we liked was the overview of the module topics and lessons, so it tells you what standard you're focusing on. So if you're running out of time for assessments, you can, you can check off, oh yes, they did get it as you're moving along the lessons.
With the exit tickets.
Yeah, with the exit tickets.
I appreciate what you're calling out. Is this what you're calling attention
Yes,
to?
the overview.
So it's called the overview of module objectives. And so what you can see here is not only does it break it down, so basically I would call it a zoomed in version of the table of contents. It provides more detail. And what it affords you, the teacher, is that you can start to see patterns. Like, oh, it's okay if they don't get it in lesson 7 because we're going to be working on the exact same thing in lessons 8 and 9. So really, they've deconstructed it for you. And the standards that are in bold are the focus standards you're targeting, and the standards that are in standard font are the foundational standards that are supporting standards for this introduction. So thank you for calling attention to that, Alex. Anything else as you were paging through that stood out to you?
Mine was the remediation.
Yes.
Anticipating problems with the remediation.
So let's put this in here. So really thinking about remediation and the anticipated areas of struggle. So if you are my TKK, you don't have as much of that because you're the introduction, right? So the remediation is limited. You'll see it slightly in kinder, but if you're in TK, you will not see as much of that throughout your overviews. Let's do two more resources that we found valuable. Yes,
On
Brenda?
ours is on page 12 is the terminology that you'll be using that supports our vocabulary that we want to emphasize, and then also the tools and the representations that they're going to need for manipulatives for that particular module.
Love each of those. So definitely, we get to see that terminology, that language of the discipline, the words that are new and maybe some that are reviewed that they've heard in the past. And then one of my other favorites, those tools, which in real teacher talk is just tell me what I have to prep, right? Tell me what I need to pull out for this student to be successful. I will give you the same disclaimer that I give everyone, is that when you look at the tools, really focus on that idea of suggested. And before you just go gather all of those items, look in the context of the lesson. What are you using that item for? And I bring attention to this for my grade 1 teachers who have piloted. You know that lesson 1, right? Where are your 32 egg cartons for the first day of school? Right? And as a teacher, in true fashion, I'm panicking and calling every family member I know. I'm going to need you to dump your eggs and give me the carton. I need it for the first week of school. Do you remember what it's used for?
We did that lesson, but we didn't use egg cartons.
Because you were smarter than I was. Good
We
job.
used to
No,
take
I
it.
just read the suggested tools.
I think you suggested it as
Oh, I
part of our
remember.
training.
See?
You gave us another tip of what we could use
I think it was the
instead.
10 frame, wasn't it?
10
A 10
frame,
frame,
yes.
that's what it was, yeah.
So basically, for those of you not in first grade, you collect your egg cartons, you chop off 2 of the egg holders, and now you have a 10 frame that they can put buttons in. Seriously, a work mat does the exact same thing
Yes.
with a square on it. So that is always my disclaimer about tools. I'm glad you took my advice on that one and that you weren't cutting egg cartons the week before you started. Final word. Would anyone like to have the final word on additional resources?
Yes,
Sure, Joe.
it's a shout out to the district. At 3rd grade, they do a lot of work with measuring, weighing, mostly weighing, and I spend a fortune on scales, and they're necessary. You have to have some way of weighing. And while my wonderful kindergarten friend lent me her balance, it needs to be more accurate. So just know there's going to be a tremendous need for digital scales. Yeah. Kitchen digital. I mean, you know, Amazon was my best friend.
Yes. Module 3, right? Module 2 and 3. So as we transition, and I thank you for calling attention to that, there are some things that I want to highlight that is going to be applicable mostly for grade 2, a little bit of grade 1, but mostly this is for my friends in grade 2. As you continue to page through the overview, it's important to note that there are some things that are only located in the Module 1 overview. And so I'm going to bring your attention to it. Anything that's after the suggested tools and representation in your module overview narrative, anything that's after that page is only located in Module 1. You will not find this in your modules 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so some of those items are, if you're using sprints in your grade level, it's the directions for administering a sprint. In grade K, that'll be in Module 5. In grade TK, they do not exist for your grade band. There are directions about RDW, which is the 3-step process that Eureka uses for solving problems. It also has directions about these whiteboards and why they use them. They're simply a tool that you use to slide templates into so that students can use them over and over again. And then the back is red purely for classroom management. Anywhere in the classroom, I can see who's ready. And so oftentimes you'll see in the curriculum, especially in kinder, it'll say red when ready, so that you see the sea of red of who's ready to move on. That is located in the Module 1 overview and only in Module 1, along with modes of delivery and some of those scaffolds. Now the scaffolds will come up from module to module because the scaffolds will be applicable to whatever module you're teaching. And then there will be additional support with preparing to teach a lesson, which is really a 3-step process for planning. So these items are only located in Module 1. There is a teacher resource pack that I'm going to show you online a little bit later, where you could print this out. It's like a 12-page PDF, so that it makes it nice and easy, so that you don't always have to go back to your Module 1 to lug it out. But I wanted to let you know, if you go into Module 2, you're not crazy, it's not there. It's only in Module 1 as you're going through it. All right. The final thing that I'd like to share with you from this module overview is what is known as the topic overview. So as you start to draw a close, if you continue to page through your papers, because again, page numbers are different at this point, every module, so the module narrative is like the cliff notes, right? The whole story. The topic overview is pretty much the 1-week view. It's a whole lot easier to digest. The reason why I wanted to take a moment to point this out to you is that you'll know you're on the right page. 1, it'll say topic A. 2, it'll have a rectangular box around it. But remember how I told you could look for those words, foundational or extension, earlier? So you could look for those words in the module overview narrative, and you can also come to this little box, and it's going to be hard to see from afar, but in the bottom half of that box, you're going to see it says the word coherence links. So in the coherence links, what it's telling you, the teacher, is where this information is coming from. So it tells you the grade behind. Since this is a 4th grade module, it's telling you where it was first introduced in grade 3 module 2. If I'm trying to support students that are working above grade level, it tells me I can go ahead and look at grade 5 module 1, and it's going to give me a preview of what's to come. Later, when I show you your digital resources, these are actually hyperlinks, so that if you're pulling a small group or you need some remedial work, you can actually hyperlink to those lessons and pull those resources as needed. I told you it's kind of like a cheat sheet into being able to snag those tools. So
have that in TK.
So TK, you won't have a back, but you'll have a forward. You should have a link online that'll link you to Kinder.
Oh, it's online. I don't have it in my book.
You may have it on your, I can't remember if it's posted on your overview. Thank you, Kim, for looking at it. So with that, because I know I just poured a wealth of information on you, I'd like for you to take a moment to just turn to page 38 in your, or you could even use page 4 because that's where we've been capturing our notes, and just take a moment to jot down any big takeaways from the overview narrative that you don't want to forget. We know this is the end of the year. The summer is going to come and you're going to be like in the fall. What did she say? What was that piece? So go ahead and take a moment to highlight or circle the big thing you don't want to forget when you're back in the fall. Moving forward, I'll invite you to look up here and let's go ahead and transition. So now that we've had the opportunity to think big picture, right? It's helpful to have a global vision. Let's go ahead and start to dial in. So we started with this idea that the key shifts are, so for my 1st and 2nd grade teachers in the room, a standard lesson in Eureka Math is 60 minutes. For my kinder teachers, it's 50 minutes, and for my TK teachers in the room, it's 30 minutes. Those are the time frames and windows. And again, the piece that I want to stress there is that they're suggested time frames as we think about this. I appreciate how earlier someone called attention to the fact that you could see the distribution of instructional minutes. One of the first things I want to draw your attention to as you look at this distribution of instructional minutes, and I don't know if you can see the color being from afar, but what has the largest bulk of our time? Concept development, right? Which is where we're building that conceptual understanding. The reason why I call attention to this, because guess what? Probably my pilot teachers can answer this. When you're first starting Eureka Math, where does it feel like the bulk of your time goes? The beginning, fluency, right? And so I really want to call attention to that because that is not uncommon. The very first component of a Eureka Math lesson, 90% of the time, it doesn't always happen 100% of the time, but 90% of the time is fluency. And this is where we, as new implementers, give it all of our time. And it gets a large portion of our time because we're learning. That's the reality of it. So just some highlights about fluency. Fluency is the opening component of, as I said, 90% of the Eureka Math lessons. It's about 9 to 12 minutes, and it's really attending to those procedural and conceptual fluency skills that students need in order to be successful with today's math lesson. It also highlights things that students have learned in the past, and it previews things of what's to come, of what they'll be exposed to later on down the line. And so in this particular image, you'll see that this particular lesson has about 3 fluency activities. For my grade 2 teachers, you notice that your day 1 is consumed of all fluency activities. And so it really depends on how the lesson is structured, on the types of fluency activities you'll have. So to give you a taste of what fluency looks like and feels like, I'd like for us to engage in a little fluency activity here. So are we prepared to do this?
Yeah.
And so this is just to give you a taste of what it's like so that you know what the feel of an activity may be. So let's pretend that we're kindergarten teachers in the room, all right? Since we have a majority of kinder teachers in the room, and this actually comes from, it's not this advanced on K1, day 1, but it starts in kinder day 1. So we're going to do something. If you were in my classroom, I'd say, all right, scholars, today we're going to be counting the math way for our fluency activity. And I'd say, all right, walk them up. And so my students would come up here at 0. And in true counting the math way fashion, we're going to start with our pinky, and we're going to count on starting at 1. Are we ready? 1, 2, 3. Whoa, watch me for my pace, right? What number are we on? 3. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6. Nice job. 7, 8, 9. Ooh, show those 10 counting sticks. All right, let's bring it back down. And 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Excellent job, my friend. So in kinder, we learned to count the math way early on. Thoughts on why we're counting the math way early on?
Well, it's not thoughts, but one, kinder teachers really listen to this part because it really makes a huge difference in the kids' thinking. When we started using, of course, their little fingers are not that strong now, but trust me, they do get stronger. But the biggest and most exciting thing about this part is that it helps the kids count up and down so quickly that they could solve any math problem just like that. So if they practice doing the math count way,
The math way of counting,
the math way
right?
of counting, then it really helps the kids thinking quickly.
Definitely. Another beauty of the system is that we can relate it to doing multiplication later. And so what is a 1 now can become a 3. 1 3, 2 3s, 3 3s, 4 3s, 5 3s, 6 3s, 7 3s. And if I know what 5 3s is and 2 3s, I can add them together to help me multiply. So that foundational skill is huge as they move up the grade band. Let's go Janet, and then I'll go to Myrna. Yes, Janet.
Okay, well, one of the things I work on is fine motor skills. And so we put our hands on the table
Yes.
and we practice lifting one finger at a time, which I think if you did some of this, then it would also help with that dexterity.
Most definitely.
Of that. I mean, you mean even as adults, if you try to lift your ring finger, I mean, you have
Right.
to look and think about it to make that one only that finger lift, you know? So,
Yeah.
but anyways, that's just a little activity that we work on that would probably help with that dexterity.
Definitely, and that's really one of those pieces. I called it my finger yoga to get my fingers to bend in that way. Brendan, did you have something you wanted to add
It's
on?
actually the same thing as
Okay.
she did, because I noticed, especially our love bunnies, they had a hard time with the motor skills. So having them put it down did help, because it was easier for them to lift that finger and to go ahead and connect.
And
So I
I
was
love-
thinking maybe drawing a hand so they can place it, so they can figure out like which finger they're picking up.
And I can do one better for you. Take the template from Kinder Module 1, it's already there for you. And then they just put their hand on top.
Oh, there you go.
See, look at what.
Yes.
Collaboration vertically is going to be your best friend about where can I get a template and why are we doing it that way? Because you'll get to see that coherence as you work vertically amongst your grade bands. All right, we're gonna do one more fluency activity just because I can't let it go, even if I'm taking a little bit of extra time with fluency. So I want to give you a perspective of something that students will learn in K2, and I say this because you'll be calling it happy counting in grade 2. But when students get beyond grade 2, it's just called counting or unit counting, depending on the lesson of the day. And so the way this fluency activity works and feels is that the teacher would step in front of their scholars and they would say, all right, ladies and gentlemen, our scholars, today we're going to be doing some counting. When you see me do this, I want you to count up. When you see me do this, look at the heads going yes. We do it in first grade as well. I want you to count down, and if you see me do this, I'd like for you to stop. All right, so today we're going to be counting at 4, starting at 0. What are we counting by?
4.
And we're starting at?
0.
So the first number I'm going to say is? 0. All right, are we ready?
0, 4, 8, 12, 16, 12, 16, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36.
Loud and proud, you know your 4s.
32, 36,
40,
36, 32, 28, 24, 20, 16, 12, 8.
Eight. Did I get that right? We're at 8.
4, 0.
Excellent job. So thinking about that activity, and for, right? What was a little bit, I heard the giggles come through. What was a little bit challenging about that activity?
The listening, focusing on
Right?
your hand.
Listening, focus on a signal. We want to give students think time to really think about, are we going up, are we going down? What is for more, what is for less? And thank you kinder teachers for teaching them more and less in the beginning of the year, because we will use it throughout the rest of their career. So I'd like to give you a moment to go ahead and open up in your teacher edition to lesson 1. For grade 2 teachers, I'd like for you to turn to lesson 3, please, and take a moment to read your fluency activities. And I'll pause you there as you wrap up reading one of your fluency activities. Is that you'll notice that the time frames behind a fluency activity, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, some are as much as 5 minutes. One of the things I struggled with the most is I'd read that time frame and I'd be like, it took me that long just to read it, process what I was supposed to do, and then I still had to do the activity. So the time is not how long it takes me to process it, the time is how long it should take me from the moment I say, all right, lock it up, here we go, let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I just want you to be mindful of that. It's not thinking about processing time for you, the teacher, it's about just actual activity time, which is why I wanted you to experience that. The other thing that I want to highlight that you can see on this page, and this is something that I would either mark in the margin of your teacher edition, or this is a perfect place where you could use page 38 to add this note, is that every fluency activity comes with a note below the title. And the note really tells you its bigger purpose. As some of your friends shared out just a little bit earlier, when the writers wrote the curriculum, they wanted fluency to serve 3 purposes. Purpose number 1, they wanted the activity to prepare them for today's lesson. Purpose number 2, they wanted to maintain skills that the children had learned in previous grade levels, and so they did activities that would remind them of the work that was done in previous grade levels. And purpose number 3, they wanted to front load difficult concepts that were coming later on in the second half of the module. As new implementers and as you go into next year with your year of learning, here's what I want you to do. Circle the word prepares. Focus on teaching yourself the preparation fluency activities. You have enough to learn in a single year. And when you're ready and you feel like, hey, module 1, I got those preparations down, then work on building in capacity with maintenance and anticipation. But here's the big plug and be mindful of. If we never build that capacity, maintenance does not stay maintenance. It will fall away from your students if we don't practice. So as a teacher, give yourself a moment to breathe, to focus on preparation through the first 3 topics, but then build capacity with maintenance and anticipation. Questions? Concerns? No? That's our little reminder to breathe. It's gonna be good, right? We're learning a lot in a single day, but we're breathing and we're going through this together. So let's transition into the second component. Now the second key component of every Eureka math lesson is an application problem. And I should really take those words back. Not every Eureka math lesson. Again, it's probably close to 90%. Application problems are really focusing on that element of rigor that we talked about earlier. But it's important to note, especially in grade 1 and 2, that if your concept development is teaching students how to problem solve, then they omit the application problem. There's no purpose in giving them double the work when they're focusing on it on today's concept development. But the application problem is there for the other 90% of the time. The only time it's omitted is because it's built in to your concept development. And in your grade band, you're kind of special. Sometimes your application problem is not right after fluency. Sometimes it comes at the end of the lesson because you're teaching a problem-solving strategy, and so now this is your formative assessment of if they understand it. So I'm going to invite everyone to turn to page 9 in your participant handout. So what you see on the top of page 9 is what was pointed out to you in your only module 1. What you see here is the 3-step process that the curriculum utilizes to solve application problems known as RDW. Now, RDW is officially called out in grade 1, module 4, lesson 19. Lesson 19 is the first time they hear those 3 letters as redraw right. But up until that point, TK and K, you're saying it. Like when you come together as a whole group, you'll say, let's read this problem first. Is there something we can draw? But you're never actually going through the letters. So that could be a teacher choice if you wanted to introduce it sooner. Its formal introduction is grade 1, module 4, topic C. So I'd like to give you a moment to read through the RDW process, and then right below it, you'll see a grade 2 application problem. Now, when you solve that grade 2 application problem, I'd like for you to hold yourself accountable to doing RDW. So read it in chunks. Are there any questions? You're so good. Everyone put their head down and started to work. All right, then I'll let you go. I'll stop interrupting. So I'll bring us together. One thing I'd like to highlight about the RDW process is that as you see that structure as it's outlined for you in those 4 steps, below it you can see that there are guiding questions. And I know based off of your inquiry work and thinking about student discourse, that's really something that we want to highlight, right? Even if we think about fluency and how your use of number talks and eliciting from students their understanding, all of these can be combined. And those are ways that I want you to think about how can you take what you already know and enhance what the curriculum is sharing with your students. So I'd like for you to think about that use of inquiry. Right now we have a video of this same problem being solved by grade 2 students who have been using the curriculum since kinder. This actually comes out of LAUSD, and this is Mrs. Watt-Lawden's classroom. She is one of the lead writers of the grade 2 curriculum, and so that is her experience and background as we go into this video. You'll see very early on that it's heavily guided. Guided mostly because the students struggled from the day before. And so just keep that in mind as you think about how she basically facilitates this conversation with her students. I will also tell you that one of her goals and objectives from the lesson was to highlight part-whole thinking. So how does the model represent part-whole relationships? Everybody ready to read? Here we go. Everybody all together like a chorus singing, go. A fruit seller buys a carton of 90 apples. Finding that 18 of them are rotten, he throws them away. He sells 22 of the ones that are left on Monday. Now, how many apples does he have left to sell? So, boys and girls, well, it's an interesting problem, so what I'm going to ask you to do is think about it, talk with a partner. What do we know? Do we know the whole and a part, or do we know the parts? Talk with your partner. Start with face partner, partner B go first. Partner B, face partner. Oh, we got a lost and found situation. Caden, why don't you come up here? Face partner. Okay, what do you guys think? What do you know? Do you know the whole in one part, or do you know? Two parts. Interesting. Joseph, do you see what? Okay. So boys and girls, I'd like you to think about how could you show that? What could you draw? What model would show the part-whole relationship? What would that look like? Talk with your partner. Okay, this time face partner, start with partner A. What kind of a model could you use? Go. Yeah, face partner. You're talking to him? I'm just listening. I'm going to ask you to repeat that. Okay, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beautiful, boys and girls. I heard great thinking. I heard Georgia explain it in a way that I would like her to share with the class. What did you say? Okay, so does everybody understand what she's saying? Why is she saying we should add the two parts together and then take that larger number? Do you understand why she's saying that, Stella?
Because we're subtracting, and if she wants to subtract it and it's easier, she adds them so she could subtract from the bigger number.
Okay. Okay, so let's do that. Now you can make a model any way you'd like. I'm going to show two different ways, and you can be modeling as you like. I'm going to show the whole, the 90 apples, and I'm going to show those two parts. Okay, so what's our first part? 18. What are the 18? What part of the problem is that? So I'm going to label it rotten. And then the other part is 22. What's the 22? Sold. And where is my question mark?
It goes because that
Are what? Are left. So we could have this. We could also do it as a number bond with 90. And it's okay to have more than, usually we have the whole in one part. We can have more than one part. Here we do. We have 18
and we have 22, and here's our question mark. Okay, so go ahead and solve to find out how many apples he has left. Which would be more efficient? Would it be easier to take 18 out of 90 and get one answer, and then take 22 out of that answer? Think about it as arms holding the entire amount. So, there you go. Okay. Now, what are the parts that you know?
18 and 22.
Okay, so show that. Hold on 1 second, sweetheart. Okay, keep going. I'm gonna stop because we have to move on. Let me ask, hold on. Who would like to share? All right, sweetheart, take a seat. Who would like to share what they did? Caden. Can I see first? Okay. All right, I'm gonna ask you if you can explain. Can we get that up? No, we're only gonna do one, sweetie, because we don't have enough time for everybody. Could I ask you to turn the lights off, Precious? Is that okay? Okay, so let's listen to Caden explain what he did.
What I did is I added.
Wait, can you first show us where's your part whole model? Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. The only thing, does that make sense to everybody? Do we see why he did that? Ava, does that make sense why he did that, how he added? Okay, the only thing I would ask is that we have a statement. So how many apples does he have? He has 50, and let's say the unit, 50 what? Apples. He has 50 apples.
About that RDW process. Is your unknown clearly identified? Maybe with a question mark or an empty box in true first and second grade fashion, right? We don't have variables till third grade. Do you have a number sentence that shows how you got there? That's part of the first W in right. A number sentence, right? Because ultimately that number sentence is the efficient pathway to get there. And then I challenge you to look and see, do you have a word sentence that highlights the unit that you were solving for? That is part of the beauty and magic of RDW, is really supporting us as teachers, thinking about all of those little steps that students need to be mindful of when they're working through a problem. And it's interesting, thinking about all the years that I've taught. Teaching problem solving in K2 was the most difficult because we have number sense. We know what the answer is, we fill in the blanks naturally. So to understand where students are going to have hiccups, it's really, or I found it quite difficult because I was like, of course they're gonna add those numbers together, that makes sense to me. And so what I want to draw your attention to, even as you look in your own teacher edition at an application problem, is that every application problem has an exemplar. This is not what the students need to write verbatim, but rather a reminder of what they should have. If the focus is on part-whole relationships, then we want to see a bar model or a number bond. We want to make sure that the unknown is clearly identified, things that we may forget as teachers. Sometimes we just leave it blank, that there's a word sentence and a number sentence. So really, that exemplar model is just reminding us of the three-step process, the R, the D, and the W, and to draw attention to it. Questions about RDW? All right. Well, I'd like for us to give it a shot. I'd like to take the context, because I'm starting that grade 2 problem. We were all like, oh, yeah, that's easy. And I go back to this. The struggle in K2 is not about knowing the math. We know the math. The struggle is how do I intercept or know where my students may stumble. So with that, I have an upper grade problem that I'd like us to try to solve. And here comes the, no nervousness, we've got this. It's on page 10 in your participant handout. So I'll give you a moment to flip there. All right. And so as we take a moment to get there, it is page 10 in your participant handout. And again, this, we're gonna go in true RDW. This might be tape delayed a little bit. Maybe it wants to show you what I'm doing up here. You're gonna have to take my word for it. We'll work through the tech. All right. So you are now the experts of RDW. You just read the process. So what would be our first step?
Read the problem.
Yeah, let's read the problem in its entirety. So beginning at Saeed is his name. All right, so in 3, 2, read.
Saeed bought 24 pounds of ground beef for a block party. He used 1/4 of the beef to make tacos and 2/3 of the remainder to make burgers. How many pounds of ground beef did he use to make burgers?
Excellent reading, scholars. Right, so now that we have this understanding about Saeed, let's go back and let's chunk it out. Let's go back and let's read it piece by piece. So let's take a moment just to read that first sentence, all right? Let's read that first sentence again in 3, 2, read.
Saeed bought 24 pounds of ground beef for a block party.
Excellent. So what can you tell me about Saeed? What do you know? What do you notice? And I'm going to come here since that doesn't seem to want to be working. So tables. What did you notice in that first sentence? Saeed's bought a lot of beef, right? 24 pounds. That's but it's good. We know he's having a block party, right? We already solved that part. So my question for you is there something we can draw to represent the 24 pounds of beef? So I hear a tape diagram. You can definitely give me models. I'm just wondering yes or no. Is there something we could draw?
Yes.
Sure, we can definitely draw something. So I love that Jill, right? As Jill mentioned, let's go with the tape diagram. So let's represent what we know so far. So we're going to draw a tape diagram. Learn from my mistake, first year teaching it. We're going to draw a box, is what I said a whole lot of times. We're going to draw a tape diagram. And as we represent this tape diagram, what do we know? The whole is 24. 24 what? What's our unit?
Pounds.
24 pounds. What does that go with? Right, and this represents that whole chunk of meat that he just bought for his block party. So now let's read the second sentence in 3. Oh, actually, let's read together this part. So in 3, 2, 3.
He used 1/4 of the beef to make tacos.
So let's just pause right there. So now what do we know?
We know one part. There's 1/4.
Okay, we know one part. What else do we know?
There's 4 parts.
We know, okay. Tell me more. How do you know there are 4 parts, Janet?
Because it says he used 1 out of 4 parts.
It says, so 1/4 the fraction means he used 1 out of the 4 parts. What else do we know? What's he doing with that 1/4 of the beef?
Making tacos.
He's making tacos. So turn and tell your partner, what do you think we can add to our drawing to represent the 1/4 being used to make tacos? So turn and tell your partner.
We made 1/4, so we found where the middle was, then found where the next middle would be on the left-hand side.
I love that. So do you hear what Sandy's saying? She's saying that they went ahead and partitioned their model. So let's do that. Let's partition our model. And you mentioned that you started with half, and then you imagined or visioned where you would partition to make fourths. Love that strategy of starting with half, knowing those equivalents on how we can break it down. So now I can see that I have partitioned it into 4 pieces. Am I done? Is there more that I can add to my model? I can label it, right? In true kinder fashion, we learned that word in kinder, label. So what can I label?
1/4 is tacos.
Yeah, I can label one of these 4s as tacos. I'm just gonna use T for tacos. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
All right, so let's keep reading. So we paused at tacos and we read. And 2/3 of the remainder to make burgers. Well, that's kind of a tricky word, right? Remainder. What does that word remainder mean? Leftovers. All right, so that means, am I talking about everything or am I talking about what?
The remainder.
The ones that's not labeled.
Those that are not labeled, right? So if I were to look at that, go ahead and draw a line underneath with your finger what the remainder is so that I can see. We're all talking about what a remainder is. Love that. Love that use of the whiteboard to model it. Look at that. All right, so as we think about that remainder piece, all right, so now what am I using of these remainders? How many of them?
2/3.
2/3 of them, right? So I'm using how many of these pieces? 2 of the pieces. And what are they going to be used for?
Burgers.
Burgers. All right, so can you go ahead? How can we label that? What would that look like? Go ahead and model and show, label 2/3 of the remainder being used as burgers. And turn and show your neighbor to see if you have something similar. Thumbs up if you and your neighbor have 2 boxes labeled with burgers. Does it matter which 2 boxes I label? No. No, right? Because I know it's 2 out of the 3 that are left over are part of that piece. Now let's continue to read. How many pounds of ground beef did he use to make burgers? So what am I trying to find? How many burgers? Yeah, I'm really focusing on this beef part, right? This is what I'm trying to solve for. How many pounds were used to make burgers? Are there any questions I can answer for you in order to help you solve this problem? Okay, then take a moment to go ahead and solve it. How would you go about solving how many pounds of beef were used to make burgers? And you can work on it with a shoulder partner if you like, or you can do it independently. And let's bring it back in. So out at our tables, how many pounds of ground beef did Saeed use to make hamburgers?
12.
How many pounds? Oh, I'm hearing 12 pounds from first grade. What did Kinder get? TK Kinder. 12 pounds as well. 12 pounds as well. So thinking about how we got to 12 pounds, I'm thanking Jill in now for in advance. Jill allowed me to use her work after answering so graciously when I volunteered her. Jill, will you explain to us your process on how you went about solving this problem?
Okay, starting with the tape diagram, I divided it, like they said, into the 4 parts. And then I took 24 and divided by 4, and I got each part was worth 6 pounds. And then after taking off the tacos and marking which pounds worth of burgers, I did 6 plus 6 is 12, and 6 times 2 is 12.
I love that, to find the total. And what is the written sentence that you wrote?
Saeed used 12 pounds to make burgers.
Excellent work. Round of applause for Jill as we do that, right? Snaps as we think about it. Great. So, taking a moment to pause and reflect and thinking about RDW and two styles that you saw, right? The goal in the bigger picture of RDW, and I know sometimes this is a hiccup, it's not about the tape diagram, but rather it's about when we use models, how can we use the model to help us understand and make sense of the story? That is the bigger picture of why we're doing these models and drawings all along the way. In your participant handout, and thank you, Jill, and I'll bring it back to you, on page 10, what you see there are the modes of delivery when it comes to modeling application problems. And the reason why I call your attention to that is that you had the opportunity to watch one mode of delivery that was heavily scaffolded, and you got to experience another mode of delivery, where I supported mostly through the way, but then I released you to work independently. You as a teacher decide which mode works best for your students based on the content that you're covering for the day. So understand that it's not a cookie cutter, right? One size does not fit all. It's based on your students' understanding. And so I just wanted to take a moment to highlight that and have you experience both ends. It's about creating access for all learners, not just the ones that are at grade level with us in that moment. Questions about application? So then let's take a moment to go ahead and continue moving on, and we're going to move on to concept development. So I'd like to invite you in your teacher's edition to turn to the concept development of your first lesson for everyone else, or lesson 3 if you are a second grade teacher. Sorry, I didn't mean to pause and delay there. All right. So as the first grade table eloquently stated earlier, the concept development, there's no better way to say it than to say it is the heartbeat of the lesson. It's where we bring conceptual understanding to life. But the first thing I need you to understand is how we read these instructional minutes up at the top. The first thing that you need to understand about how we read this is that the vision was not that 35 minutes, because this is the model I'm using for 4th grade, 35 minutes is not what it will take me, the teacher, to teach everything that's right there, but rather 35 minutes is what I have that's within their zone of proximal development at where they're developmentally understanding me versus me dragging them along. And so the way I read this as a teacher is that I look at this concept development and I have to identify it as, okay, if it says 35 minutes, I need to reserve 10 of those minutes for independent work. We don't build perseverance without independence. And so I need to save 10 of those minutes for the problem set, which is intended to be an independent activity. Which means the remaining time, so we can do this math, right? 35 minus 10 leaves me with 25 minutes. 25 minutes again is not how long it'll take me to do all of problems 1, 2, 3, and in this particular one, it has 5 problems. But rather 25 minutes is what I have before I'm drowning my 4th graders. So I, as a teacher, need to read through this concept development and think big picture. How do I tell a coherent story? The writers didn't write this so that you would read it as a script. The writers wrote it so that you would have eyes and ears into their thinking of how they wanted the story to be told. So it wasn't, it's not this scripture that I'm reading line for line. So I'd like to give you a moment with your peers at your table to read through your concept development. Take a moment and buddy up. One person be teacher, one person be student. The vision as we go into teaching a lesson is that we have time in a PLC or with our grade level team to read it and make sense of it and digest. What is this new learning that I am sharing with my students? Are there questions that I can answer? No, because I see you already reading from a list. All right, I'll stop talking then.
You might want to stop waiting.
I know there's going to be some discrepancies here, especially as I think about my kinder and first grade teachers, or I'm sorry, my TK and my kinder teachers, but it will be easier to see with grade 1, 2, and with this model that we have up on the board now. What you'll come to realize is that as you read your concept development, the problems and the models that you're doing in the concept development are directly correlated to the independent work that they'll do later. The reason for that is that as you work through the models, learn from my mistake, I had a smartboard. In true smartboard fashion, I used to click from slide to slide. But what I wasn't doing was I wasn't building an exemplar that students could look back when they got to independent work. So if you take the time to work through your problems on a whiteboard or on chart paper or however you model your work, when you leave it on the board, that becomes their exemplar for perseverance and independence. It is a scaffold, so I just want to highlight that feature. The other feature that I want to highlight, which makes Eureka a little bit different than other curriculums. In the past, I could always say, oh, do the odds, do the evens. Do the left, do the right, do page 1, do page 2. You have to understand that the problem set, which is the student work, is not written in that fashion. It is written as a ladder and a scaffold. The first problem on the page will be the easiest, and the last problem on the page will be the most complex. They increase in complexity. So as a teacher, be mindful of this. If you keep your students with you and you guide them through problems 1, 2, and 3, and then release them for 4 and 5, you just release them to the hardest problems on the page, right? You have to be strategic on what you're asking your students to do independently. So I just want to shine a light on that because I would do it all the time, and in true teacher fashion, I don't know how to do number 5, skip it, because I don't have time to come show you. I have to help this group right here. So be proactive.
And that's why they don't give you that many word problems.
Exactly.
Problems. They're
Yeah.
just short to the point and then level of complexity.
Yes, because they thought about that. They were trying to be intentional with every step of the way. And if you ever look at the homework that comes with the curriculum, and I know that your use of homework is different, but if you look at it and you want to use it for small groups, it mirrors the problem set. It's the exact same formatting with different numbers, so that it can be used as a resource and additional problems as a tool. Questions about the concept development? I know we're going through it a little quickly, but I just want to honor those questions that you have.
You mentioned homework. Is the homework included in the in their student workbooks, or do we have to?
I have to remember which workbooks you got, so I can't.
No,
but thank you.
Okay, so if we wanted to use the homework, we would have to make our own copies.
Yeah. Good question. Any other questions before we transition from the concept development? So then I'm going to take you to the fourth and final component of every Eureka math lesson. And this is guaranteed 100% of the time. So I'll invite you to turn to that page in your teacher edition. The fourth and final component of every Eureka math lesson is what is known as the student debrief, or within that lesson structure, it says debrief. I'm going to tell you right now, as a new implementer of the curriculum, it's going to be the first piece you cut because it's the last component and you're out of time, right? Math is already 90 minutes long and I gotta go. The recess is happening, the kids are rolling around, it's taken too long. Okay, so here is my advocacy for not cutting it. The intentionality behind the student debrief is everything you've done research on about discourse. If we don't give students the opportunity to talk about their learning in their own words and communicate with their friends and with you what they learned for the day, they will not retain it. So that when they go home and you ask them, what did you learn in school today? And the shoulders go up. It's because they never had a chance to process it on their own. We've just shared it at them all day. This is their chance to give it back to us. This was my #1 formative assessment with my class. That's how I knew I wasn't using the word tape diagram. Because my students said, oh, we used that box today to solve problems. That's me. I used the word box all day. I never called it a tape diagram. I never called some of the models by their name. I just was like, oh, let's draw this. And that's how they remembered it. It was very eye-opening to hear what my students said back. I was like, oh, I definitely do say that. Maybe I need to change that word choice in class. So the debrief is about metacognition. It's about giving your students a chance to breathe and share with you what they've learned. The other thing that you'll notice is that the debrief has the answer key to the problem set, because the intention was that they were looking at their problem set and you were drawing attention to the patterns on the page that maybe they didn't see. So that's why it's there side by side. As a reminder for you, the teacher, how did problem B help you solve C? It's to make connections for them. And with every At the conclusion of every student debrief is also an exit ticket, which is not in play for my TK friends, but is in play for 1st and 2nd grade. It's a short, formative assessment that helps you get an understanding of where your students are with that day's objective. And that rounds out the 4 components of a Eureka math lesson. Questions about that piece? You can tell me to slow down because I do see you writing. So, putting a bow on those 4 components is important to understand that all 4 are really addressing the 3 key shifts. And by cutting any one point out, we eliminate developing rigor within our students. So in order to develop rigor, we have to do all the components with equal intensity. So that's your reminder as you go into the new year. When you do that first lesson, you can think back to what I said. Oh yeah, she said fluency was gonna be 30 minutes in before I realized I should move on, and that's okay. It's like that for everyone when they're learning it. I think even your pilot teachers could probably attest to, it's like, oh man, I'm not even at the concept development and I'm 90 minutes in. Give yourself a chance to breathe and take your year of learning to heart. You're going to learn, you will get better, and it will get easier as you move along the way. So, as we put that bow on the 4 components, there's not much I want to say about assessments. I think your district said it perfectly in the very beginning. It's to know that the assessments within the curriculum were always intended to be formative. They wanted assessments that would help guide your instruction as a teacher. And so with that, you'll notice that when you look at the assessments within your own curriculum, it's a progression towards mastery. It's not about, and I say that really, like I can't stress to you how important it is you understand it's a progression towards mastery, because I was that 1st grade teacher who did module 1 and pretty much cried and thought I was an awful teacher because all my kids scored 1s and 2s. They weren't supposed to score 4 yet. They're supposed to get the 4 by the end of the year, not the start of the year, because this is the introduction to the standard. And so it's really important for you as teachers to understand that piece, that we're progressing all along the way. So as we transition into some of these final little components, and again, please slow me down if you feel like I'm going too fast. I want to share a couple things that when you come back in the fall, because right now I don't think is the right time for you to dive deep into this. You would be like, I'm already overwhelmed with everything she shared. But I do want you to know that there are resources and tools to help all along the way as you go through this process. In the fall, and maybe sooner, based on the PD schedule that you have, in your participant handout on page 25, and I would invite you to flag it or put a little post-it there. You have our ladder thread where it says, preparing to teach a lesson. It's on page 25 in your participant handout. As you look at it, it looks really familiar because it was also in your module overview of module 1. It's one of those items that's only. So, when you teach your first Eureka math lesson, and actually after you teach a week of it and you're like, this is ridiculous, she said it was gonna be long, but she didn't say it was going to be this long. It's on that day that I want you to come back to this post-it and read these words. Until you've had the opportunity to experience it, some of what's written here is a little hard to digest right now. But when you've taught a lesson and you've watched yourself take an exorbitant amount of time trying to get it done, you're ready to listen to what this has to say. So just put a little flag by it and say, see me in the fall. Which means one thing that we always want to make clear is that as you go through this year of learning, we also want you to understand what it means to teach something with fidelity. I think from district to district, we hear plenty of definitions regarding fidelity. But I'd like for you to take a moment to read the top of page 25. The reason why I want to point that out to you is because to teach Eureka math with fidelity is not to read it line by line, right? To teach Eureka math with fidelity is to think about your students' needs first, and then how can I support them to be successful. The curriculum is just there to enhance the instruction that you're doing. But you are the master of that classroom. You will make decisions based on what is best and what meets the needs of your students, and we always want you to remember that. The curriculum was always intended to put you, the teacher, and your students first. And no one can do that better than you because you know them the best. I can't tell you what will be best for your kids because that's not how it's engineered. I can tell you what's best for my fourth graders in the year that I have them. And even that changes from year to year.
Yeah.
So I want you to keep that in mind as you go through this first year. I know that I have like 3 minutes left. And in those 3 minutes, I want to take a moment to share some resources that you all have access to. So don't feel like you have to take tons of notes on this piece. These resources are listed out in your participant handout beginning on page 29. Right? So they begin in your participant handout on page 29. So you can thank your district for this. One of the beautiful things that your district did for you with regards to implementation is that they granted each of you access to digital resources that each of you have the ability to check out and utilize. There we go, we're up and on. And they are all located on the Great Minds website. The link is at the bottom of your page. The website is called greatminds.org. And when you sign in for the first time, you'll want to use your school district email because you already all have an account if you haven't gone there before. And so what this digital resource has for you is basically has everything at your fingertips in digital format. So all the things that we looked at in your teacher's edition are built in for you digitally. Aside from looking at a scope and sequence of the year, the beauty of this is that I can see all lessons and every element. If a student was absent, I would be able to print a single item at the touch of a fingertip. And the nice thing about this, as I wrap this up, is that there are embedded videos. Every time you see a little video icon, and this connects you to the library you all have access to as Teach Eureka. And what you'll see here, and I appreciated how it was stated so nicely, take notes. What worked? What didn't work? When you log in under your own name, you have a spot right here that will save notes for you. You can say, this part worked. This part did not work. Each of those lesson tools are up on the top. They can be printed out for that child that, of course, as always, rips the page and you need one more page really quickly other than a bucket full of tape. Each of those can be selected and printed on demand versus having to go through your workbook. You'll notice that in your participant handout, there are many other resources that I will not have the time to share with you today, but that you have access to, from parent resources that are in English and Spanish, to other videos that your district has access to called the video gallery. Each of these items are at your fingertips that you'll be able to look at. And the final piece, and I do wish that I had more time to share it, but I do want to draw attention to it because of the heavy population in this room, is that for my kinder friends, when you go online, in your bottom right-hand corner, you have something known as the observational assessment. These are new assessments that were made to support you so that one-on-one interviews don't have to happen in that elongated fashion. Rather, there's a checklist of cards that are a tool that you may utilize to support you with assessment. So it makes it a little, I love them, they're way better, just in my own opinion, that is the piece. All right, I totally know I took it over a minute. I apologize for my 1 minute. I want to thank you for your time. Enjoy, it has been a delight to be with you. And reach out if you have questions. Your people know how to reach me, so thank you. Thank you.